Well, a warm welcome to today's talk. It's the 2nd of April and it's Good Friday. So I hope you have a happy and, if appropriate, a contemplative day. Now, I'm going to start off with some news from the United Kingdom this morning. Basically, the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, has been saying out loud what people have been thinking for some time, that basically this lockdown situations and these major restrictions can't go on forever. There's a time when we have to tolerate a certain number of deaths. Let's look at his thinking. Now, you can watch the whole video of this. It's all readily available. There's nothing covert about this here. It's on YouTube. Click on it and watch the whole thing. So the last lockdown in the UK is looking like we are in it now. So for some time, the Prime Minister has been saying the current reversal of the lockdown is irreversible. And barring anything absolutely major, it's looking like that is the case. And I think this is probably going to apply to the United States as well. Europe, it will apply to Europe in 3 or 4 months' time because of the dramatic increase in cases they're currently going through in Europe as we speak, which we've looked at it in recent days. So Chris Whitty saying lockdown unlikely to be needed again. Sounds good. Britain learns to treat coronavirus like flu. Now, Chris Whitty, a doctor himself, of course, he wasn't saying coronavirus is a similar illness to flu, not at all. What he was saying was, though, that because a certain number of flu deaths are tolerated every year, then a certain number of COVID deaths are probably going to have to be tolerated every year as well. So he's talking about the public attitude rather than the microbiology of the illness. Now, he says up to 25,000 people die in a bad flu year without anyone noticing. For example, 2017, 2018. Now, I certainly noticed. I was working on the local accidents and emergency department at the time, and we had a lot of people in with flu and a lot of people in with the secondary bacterial infections to flu, which, of course, we can treat. But it doesn't alter the fact in a bad flu year, there are a lot of deaths, and he's right. It never made the papers. If that's what he means by without anyone noticing, then it wasn't in the popular press. That is true. Every year, somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 people die of influenza. Unfortunately, that is the case. Most of them are very elderly. That is also true. Accepting some COVID deaths as the price of a whole life, what he describes as a whole life. Meaning schools are open, meaning you can go out for a drink with your friends, meaning you can go on holiday, meaning you can do all the things that we've taken for granted for most of our lives, up until these recent restrictions. Now, this is the Royal School of Medicine webinar. I think it's a regular thing. I don't actually subscribe to it. I might have a look at that. But anyway, it's on YouTube there. So if you actually go onto this site here, it tells you you're too late. The webinars are already finished, which of course it has. It was yesterday. But the whole thing's there on YouTube, all in the open, all in the public domain. Now, Chris Whitty does say the government could pull the alarm cord because of dangerous new variants of concern. Or indeed, if there was a new pathogen altogether, because the next pandemic is coming. Let's hope it's not for many years. So he's kind of saying, basically, we're going to have no more lockdowns unless there's a really dramatic, devastating variant of concern. From what I know at the moment, and from what I understand of Chris Whitty's thinking, that is fairly unlikely. I don't think we're going to get a devastating variant of concern at the moment. I'm hoping not. And I don't think we will. And I expect the vaccines to have a good degree of protection against serious illness and death from the variants of concern. Because even though these are variants, and they can have different transmissibility, they can have different vaccine to sensibility, varying vaccine efficacy, fair few things still can vary, but there's still SARS coronavirus too. It's not like a completely new virus, so we will expect cross immunity, even though there has been some reinfections. But one that is essentially starting a new pandemic, a new variant of concern that starts a new pandemic, or what is essentially a new pandemic, I don't think that is going to happen. And Chris Whitty doesn't seem to be thinking that either. Now, he says COVID's not going to go away. Now, I'm still hopeful we can get rid of this in a few seasons. It will take a few seasons. It will take global vaccination. But I still think that's possible. So I'm going to put a question mark there. So it's not for me to disagree with the Chief Medical Officer who says it's not going to go away. But I'm hopeful if it doesn't go away in the next few seasons, it can be gradually diminished. And in 10 years' time, or hopefully a lot less than that, it could potentially be eradicated. I still feel that's possible, but of course time will tell. You've got to work out what's a rational policy to this end, to this. And here I would differentiate quite a lot, as I mess up my printouts, between a pandemic environment and what you get with the seasonal flu. So it's saying that we have been in a pandemic environment, so you do need lockdown measures there. But what we have at the moment is more akin to seasonal flu. Now, this news came out yesterday, and I was asked to do a LBC radio interview about it. And I had about 2 minutes to prepare, so it was a bit silly, but I'll share my thinking with you. So 7,000 to 9,000 flu deaths in a normal flu year, as Chris Whitty's just said. Now, at the moment, COVID deaths in the UK are about 320 deaths in the past 7 days. Now, this is still 320 deaths, but that works out at about 1,300 deaths per month. And over a 5-month winter flu, or what might be a 5-month winter COVID season, that would work out at about 6,400 deaths over a 5-month period, if the death rate was the same as it is now. Now, I know that's a ludicrous assumption. I know we could argue about it. But it does mean that the COVID deaths now are down roundabout to where seasonal flu deaths are over the flu season. Although having said that, COVID is increasing greatly, even though it's spring in Europe. So the analogies do break down somewhat. But those kind of numbers, you can see where it's coming from. You can see where it's coming from. So it's clear that we're going to have to manage it at some point, rather like we manage flu. In other words, we're going to have to accept a certain amount of morbidity and deaths. Here is a seasonal, very dangerous disease. Well, it is right, it is worse in winter. But again, I would point out that cases are increasing now despite spring in Europe. But anyway, let's go with this thinking. Here is a seasonal, very dangerous disease that kills thousands of people, and society has chosen a particular way around it. Okay, no, I think he's talking about flu there. And the way around it is largely to ignore the deaths. Society would not tolerate lockdown numbers to prevent flu-type numbers. So I think that's true. We want to get as close as we can to zero, but the question is, how do you balance that against other priorities? What are people prepared to put up with? And flu appears to be optional anyway, but we put up with flu. Now, this is interesting. Let me show you why this is being said. So here we see that this graphic here is flu cases. So, of course, we get more in winter. So this is 2016, 17, 18. And we see there was a lot of cases of flu in the winter 17,000 and 18. And that caused about 25,000 deaths at that period of time. So these flu cases, and then winter 2018-19, lots of flu. Winter of 2019 to 2020, quite a bit of flu. And there we did have some flu cases that overlapped with COVID cases, which is so that was some of those were flu plus COVID. So that will be an issue I'll mention in a minute. But anyway, 2020 to 2021, this was the cases of flu here. Essentially nothing. So a couple of questions in my mind there, really. The amount of COVID we will accept, is the COVID going to kill people that otherwise would have died of flu? In which case COVID is just kind of replacing flu, really. Or are we going to have a situation where we have a lot of flu and a lot of COVID at the same time? Now, if we do, that means people get infected with flu and COVID at the same time. Now, of course, COVID just came along towards the end of the flu season, at the beginning of 2020. So the number of cases in this kind of here where we had a combination of flu and COVID, there weren't that many, but the ones that we did have didn't do very well. That's why we were keen to get our flu vaccination at that point there. So accepting this, is flu and COVID going to be a double whammy, causing greater disease, or is the COVID going to replace deaths from influenza. At the moment, we simply don't know that. And in his talk, Chris Whitty didn't really elaborate on this interaction between flu and COVID. But again, for this radio interview, I just made a few notes that I did last night. COVID cases are going to be down because we're going to adjust the vaccines, and there's going to be a third vaccine in the UK in September for most people, almost certainly, to deal with the new variants. It could get a lot better when we have antiviral therapeutics. That's another possibility. It does look like non-pharmaceutical interventions like the mask wearing and the distancing and things may be necessary for some time. But the point is with these are cheap. We can do these. You know, if someone says wear a mask to the supermarket, that's no big deal. If someone says you can't go to work, that is a big deal. So we need to keep doing these non-pharmaceutical interventions that are easy and cheap, and that does require attitudinal change. And of course, as spring comes on, we're going to go out and make some more vitamin D, which is an immunomodulating molecule, which I believe will help. And people are also thinking more and more about their diets, which I think is also a big factor. Tim Spector was talking about this recently, that if you have a good diet, you optimise your microbiome, then that's going to help with your immunity against disease. And the other big question mark I've got here in these notes is the possibility of long COVID. Now, are there going to be a lot of cases of long COVID or not? And again, we don't really know that. If it turned out that we get a lot of cases of long COVID, again, that could influence Chris Whitty's prognostications. We need to work out some balance which actually keeps it at a low level, so that's true, obviously. Minimise deaths as best we can, but in a way that the population tolerates, or direct quotes from his talk. Through medical countermeasures like vaccines, as we've said, in the non-pharmaceutical interventions, including due course drugs, so he is mentioning therapeutics, that's good. Which means you can minimise mortality while not maximising the economic and social impacts on our fellow citizens. That is self-evidently true. It was asked directly, are lockdowns likely to be reimposed if cases rise? And he replied, I don't think so. But of course, now we have the vaccines. Even if cases rise, there'll be a lot less deaths. That's important to remember. Impossible to prevent variants from coming into the UK, he says. Okay. And of course, the other thing I was thinking is that if people have been vaccinated and there is still infection going around, then the people that are vaccinated can get potentially minimal infection. That's good in that will bolster their immune system. So it's kind of an active booster on top of the immunity they already have. That's good. But if there is a lot of circulating infection in people that are already vaccinated, the problem there is that if there's viral replication going on, the problem there is that gives opportunity for new variants to emerge. That's the possibility. Now, moving on to the United States, let's have a look at the live data first of all. And we do see a slight increase in the number of cases. Now, this is due to the new variants, and it was expected. But what we're very hopeful about in the States is that that's going to be disconnected to the number of deaths, because people would be protected from severe disease and death by vaccinations, and we are seeing that trend there. So even although cases may rise in the States, we're very hopeful that deaths won't. So that's the live data from the States there. The vaccination programme. Pretty well 100 million doses of vaccine given now, which is getting on for it is about 30% of the whole US population. On the Centres for Disease Control side, it's just under 100 million, but by the time we're speaking, it will be 100 million people have had the first dose. 56 million, 17% of the population had the second dose. And interesting to notice the Janssen vaccine now 3.5 million, so production of that and distribution of that stepping up nicely. So this is very encouraging. Now, what is interesting, the Centres for Disease Control have started having a forecasting section. So this is what they have for cases. This is what they're forecasting. So this is kind of where we're at now. We're on the 2nd of April now. So this is what they're forecasting for the next sort of few weeks, weekly figures into April. Cases being round about the same. Now, that's the average figure. Now, this grey bit here just seemed to be an artifact. I can't work out what that's for, because when you actually go and look at the estimates that this is based on in the States, well, these are all different people reporting different groups reporting their estimates for how things are going to go in the States. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but we can see, depending on who you like to listen to, we're going to get a sharp increase in the States, or other forecasters show we're going to get a fairly sharp decrease, and the average is that it's going to remain about the same. So really quite a spread there. So this line here is based on the average for those many views, all highly qualified experts, and yet what a spread of estimates for the next few weeks that we see. So quite what we can take from that, I'm not really too sure, because you can kind of pick the one you'd want, really. But I think the important point is, even if cases do rise, and I suspect they are going to rise because of the new variants, because remember, only 30% of the population has been vaccinated. There is some herd immunity as well from natural infection. But the new variants are more contagious, so I expect cases to go up, but I'm really hopeful deaths don't. Quite addictive looking at this data. This was the cases in Texas, which of course we covered the liberalisation of cases, of the liberalisation of restrictions in Texas. And yet we see cases going down. Okay, they're not going down as quickly as they were, but they're estimating this kind of slight decrease over the next few weeks, according to the average of all those different prognosticators. Of course, we may see nothing like this, but that's what they're currently estimating. And for deaths in the United States, over the next few weeks, the average forecast is down to flattening off. So, of course, time will tell what actually happens. But I just thought that was interesting, that wide variety. So these are all sorts of different informed opinions, and yet such a wide variety of possible outcomes. It really does show that the science on this is not absolute by any means. Now, that's the main things I wanted to do today. I just want to show, we mentioned that cases in Europe are going up quite dramatically. Few other places in the world as well, just to give a bit of context. Iraq, missed a bit there. So starting off with Iraq, there's always been poor compliance with non-pharmaceutical interventions and restrictions in Iraq. And they are seeing a surge now. Over half of the cases they're seeing are the UK variant, and the doctors are reporting younger patients. So we see that the new UK variant in the case of Iraq causing a surge in cases in Iraq, unfortunately. And vaccination in Iraq, early March they received 50,000 doses, Sinopharm 306,000 doses. Early March, 50,000 doses from Sinopharm, then another 336,000 doses from the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Not a lot for the population of Iraq. They are expecting several million Pfizer vaccines, but of course they have not arrived yet. So vaccination is not going to be the answer to the current surge in Iraq. And it's just strange that there's so much Western money and blood being spilt on Iraq, and now so little interest. The irony just seems to strike me every time I look at the figures. Where am I? There we are. India. Fairly big increase in cases in India based on testing, so underreported. 12.3 million cases in India altogether. High since October. Deaths somewhat increasing in India. And the cases are the biggest increases around about Delhi and in Maharashtra area, around about Mumbai, which is where coincidentally the vaccines are made, in Pune. Vaccination is free in India. Now, if you go to a private hospital in India, they'll charge you about $3 for the vaccine, but in the government facilities, they're free. So basically, vaccination is freely available in India. Problems with uptake, but 65 million have been given so far. Over 45s can now get vaccinated in India. So basically, free vaccine in India is working. Supply issues. The Indians have given out 65 million vaccines to their own people, and they've also exported about 65 million vaccines because India has been one of the world's big vaccine manufacturers. And of course, we're still waiting for our 5 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine for April from the UK that's going to the UK from India. Whether we get it or not, we don't know. You can understand the pressure to keep it, to vaccinate their own population, but at the same time, we would really quite like it as well. So vaccine supplies won't be a problem by late summer, but for now they still are, of course. So that was Iraq and India. Just a brief look at another country where cases are increasing quite dramatically, Turkey. Very large population in Turkey, of course. Cases have risen, nearly 41,000 cases, diagnosed in 24 hours, some more deaths. Highest new number of cases in the whole pandemic in Turkey at the moment, higher than the first wave by quite a bit. Government eased restrictions in early March, and now cases are increasing in early April. There's going to be a nationwide weekend lockdown from the 13th of April. Now, Ramadan, I believe, starts at the 13th of April, and communal meals in Ramadan are going to be prohibited for the second year running. So Turkey making quite significant cultural sacrifices to curtail the pandemic. Curfew is going to be 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. 15 million doses of Sinovac are being given out since the 15th of January. I don't know that there's any other vaccine going out in Turkey apart from this Chinese one. So as well as Europe, we've noticed India, Turkey and Iraq with increasing cases. Okay, so that is us for today. I think the main takeaway from today is that we've got now Western governments, as exemplified by our Chief Medical Officer, saying that COVID is going to be here for a while, deaths will be accepted, and lockdown measures are not going to come back into force in a large scale. The only exception really being that there's a lot of variants of concern which would potentially overwhelm the health service again. Otherwise, the lockdown measures are going to be eased. Of course, we're still going to argue about international travel. We're still arguing about domestic vaccine passports and quite a few other things to clarify. But that direction that these deaths are going to be tolerated now seems to be accepted. And it is hard really to see any alternatives because we cannot keep on with these draconian lockdowns and the economic impact that they have had. So the story goes on, I'm afraid, and obviously more to come on all of those things. But for today, thank you for watching.